Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 374, recorded sort of live. We had some technical difficulties, so we're sort of live on Twitch as a backup for those who are wanting to watch live. Otherwise, this will be more or less a recorded show. Unfortunately, Hangouts went boom on me this day. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Google Plus Hangouts, YouTube, DDO forums, or website at DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by CyberEars, the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording. Next show will probably be next Sunday to accommodate my crazy work schedule. And you can stay updated by following us on social media pages or our website, DDOcast.com, with our calendar. This week's screenshot is I hate names like this. Nirvjan chats with Fred. That's about as close as I'm going to get with that. Our guests for this week, we have from DDO Gamer, Geoff Hanna.
Hi, people. How is everyone? Thanks for having me back.
It's always a pleasure. We also have from Solana, Vooduspyce.
Hey, everyone.
This week on the podcast, we've got some game news, some balancing tidbits, we've got the mechanic. The mechanic enhancement tree was previewed. We're also going to be discussing the Mimic Festival, and our feature discussion will be about improving your offense, whether you be a caster or melee or ranged or whatever you happen to be. We're going to be talking about how you can get some more offense out of that. We'll start with some game news. The Who tab. When development time permits, they would like to take a look at the Who tab. Basically, it's kind of actually the LFM tab. What happens is when you first log in, it doesn't automatically load everybody. Because it doesn't automatically load everybody, your LFM tab for all the groupings just doesn't show who is in the group or anyone who's leading the group. It makes it kind of weird to look at. The workaround for that is you go to the Who panel part of that and just search for generic. You can search for anything, but you can just hit enter and let it search, and it will populate the Who list, and then you can see what's going on there. You can see who's who and doing what. But that's the workaround. They want to fix it, but they've got other things they need to look at. There was a discussion on the killer DM mode, which, to be fair, I'm going to stress for the devs here that this is something that's kind of more of an internal discussion, theoretical. It's not something they're really seriously looking at least as far as I can tell. But it's kind of an interesting conversation, and a lot of folks on the forums were getting into it. Vargwil said that a major point of adding new difficulty would be for it to span across the entire existing game, ideally. We're fairly confident they can make Epic Elite difficulty enough with new quests for the endgame. Read into that Temple of Elemental Evil, which is supposed to be ridiculously hard. At least that's what they're going for. But without somewhat significant task of introducing an entire new difficulty and the issues that entails. Sev also popped in with some points. He said it was an interesting discussion, and he wanted to insert some random thoughts. Doesn't think it's possible for a team of any size to create handmade content in any video game faster than the most dedicated players can consume it. They understand they're always in a perpetual content race with the players, and they know they will always lose that battle. The plan is that Temple of Elemental Evil will be big and fun and have good itemization. It will not keep the most engaged players entirely busy for the 3.5 months it will take for Shavrath update to be finished. So there's a nice little time scale Easter egg for you there. They know that. We know that. They do their best to make content as replayable as possible. It's a rare and precious thing, maybe even close to impossible, for content to be challenging to a player that has run it many, many times and memorized the ins and outs of that content. They can change bits of it to hit harder and throw more creatures at players and have more evil tricks, but once players learn the ins and outs, those new changes in the content will once again be easy unless it can randomly just kill off people, and they don't think that's a challenge. When they talk about killer DM mode, they're talking about a new difficulty level for the existing content with system changes to make it more challenging. It would not involve any additional customization like randomized traps or additional difficulty on puzzles and the like. Let's see. The problem with making Epic Elite more relative difficulty, even for new content, is the gaps between difficulties become larger, and more players can fall into a situation where the previous difficulty is too easy, but the next one up is too hard. On the other hand, new levels of difficulty can cause the potential players' grouping to fracture even more. They understand this, and these are the conundrums that keep them up at night when they should be sleeping.
I was sad when I read that. That made me sad.
What, that it keeps them up at night?
Yeah, I've worked a job where I was stressed and couldn't sleep at night. That sucks.
I like that I can't really take my job home. He did say that the challenges in Terminal Delirium were in some ways the wrong kind of extra challenge. I think he's referring specifically to the areas where they make you more vulnerable to damage.
Crazy vulnerable, right?
Yeah. The subject of a killer DM mode is really a mad notion that is good for discussing the problems surrounding difficulty in an ongoing game. While it is theoretically possible to implement it, he thinks even the short discussion here shows potential problems in design the idea presents. He's hoping that by bringing up the discussions, he's not creating situations where players are getting upset at these theoreticals. So don't get upset at them about this, but it's fun to discuss. Do you guys have any thoughts on it?
I would be in favor of it as long as it wasn't taking time away from development of new content overall, which is probably an unrealistic thing to ask. So I'll say not taking much time. And I wouldn't want to feel like I have to run it because that's where the best items are. So if it was available, but all you got out of it was like a really cool title or bragging rights, or if you're going to go through that effort, it should be visible that you've done so. People should look at you and know right off the bat, hey, that's somebody who's beat it on mythic difficulty or whatever they call it. Good for them. But I don't want to have to do it too unless I want to.
And that's something that one of the things that they discuss as being a problem is how do you entice players to run it? What's the incentive? Is it just a status thing, or they don't want to make it a huge XP bump because they feel that there's enough XP in the game and they don't want to make players feel like they're forced to run it. So the loot thing, yeah, it was kind of one of the big question marks was what's the incentive for getting players to run it?
They already have the groundwork. I mean, more than the groundwork. It's done, in my opinion. We talked a little bit about this last time. Like, I really want them to go back to Champions Day 1 and make that the new difficulty. That work is already done. You just make it a new difficulty. Come on now. I loved Champions right away. You take them out or reduce them on Hard and Elite and just make Champion Day 1 the new difficulty. And as far as XP bonus, you don't have to have a new champion streak or whatever you'd want to call it. Just keep the elite streak intact and give it a smaller bonus to champion. I've been saying 20% when I'm posting about on the forums because you can't just do 10 because as soon as somebody dies, that extra XP becomes a wash. Somebody's going to die when the difficulty is that tough, or you're going to have a lot more deaths when the difficulty is that tough. So just a flat 20% bonus that gives you some incentive besides bragging rights, but it's not too much XP. And the people that can do that level of gameplay already know how to get fast XP, so a 20% bonus is not going to be that big of a deal, but it's something. So
here's a thought. I'm just going to throw this out there. Let me know what you guys think. What if the killer DM mode was just, they didn't really change anything. They took the quest as it would be on normal and then made every monster a champion. Would you run it?
Again, it depends on why. To me, this is kind of like an end game, and you don't need it on every quest because in order to survive this, you're already going to have to be capped and geared, right? So I don't want more cap and gear. I already got that. I want something I can only get by running this mythic level, whatever you're calling it, and I want it to be something that if I'm a regular player, I don't care if I don't have it. So, yeah, I would try that, but probably only once, and just so that I can say I did it, and hopefully so people can see I did it, and that would be that.
And this is already there, again, because you can get the mysterious fragments from champions. If champions were only in their own difficulty, they're dropping mysterious remnants, then that's your boost of a reward that you can only get there. Now, what I'm curious about, Patrick, is why did you say if it's on normal, but every monster was a champion, as opposed to on elite? What was the difference?
Just to say that you're not trying to redesign the dungeon or really go very far into stats. Just I guess it would be like an elite stat monster, but you know how the dungeons scale, right? To a
Yeah.
little bit, something like don't put a lot of effort into it. Just take, I don't know, hard or elite, or pick normal, hard, or elite, right? Take the stats and then just make everything a champion, because that's a significant boost just in and of itself. So you don't have
Hell
to
yeah.
go to the trouble of really adjusting all of the stats and stuff. The idea would just be make everything a champion in the dungeon, and it'd be really hard. It'd be killer.
So right now we got champions with the gold crown. I want 20% of them to be red crown champions, and those red crown champions have every one of the champion buffs. And so right now the regular champions have, a random selection of buffs. I want the red crown champion to have every one of them. That's like the uber champion.
Well, I was kind of trying to think of a way to do it that wouldn't involve a lot of changes or additions, but I don't know. It was just an idea of what if killer mode just meant that every monster was a champion. Would you run it?
Hell yeah, if there was an incentive. And it wouldn't have to be much. Again, that small XP, mysterious remnants.
Well, I mean, if
I
everything's
probably.
if
Sorry,
everything's
go
a,
ahead.
if everything's a champion, then you're going to get a lot of mysterious remnants out of it. You would think.
That's true.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a bit of an incentive.
I probably wouldn't run it very much. I don't find increasing the hit points of the monsters to be the kind of challenge I want. I mean, I'll do it. I play Epic Elite, but I like new content challenge more than I like, hey, this guy has 250,000 hit points. What are you going to do about it? Kind of challenge.
Yeah,
That's
it was just a quick thought, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. Let's talk about
worries.
rogues. So there were some general comments that several made regarding rogues in general. Randomized traps in Templeville, Monthly Evil, and other places will probably make a trapper with a good spot skill more valuable, especially on Epic Elite. You've been warned about going in there without a trapper, apparently, on Epic Elite. They're considering making weakening strikes reduce melee power of enemies with an assassin's mark by 10 plus half rogue level. That means level 20 rogue would be getting an extra 20% mitigation through that medium, which generally meant some favorable things. I kind of quickly just threw it out there that maybe something similar to that would work for, I think it's Crippling Strike, which is an assassin ability, or a rogue special ability that reduces strength by 2 for every hit, which stat damage isn't really that effective, particularly in epic levels, just because of the way that things work there. They recover from it a lot faster. I was thinking that maybe reducing power might be a better option there. So you talk about assassins. These are all posts from Severlin. A sneaking assassin seems pretty quick to him, but admittedly he hasn't played it in a group since they just finished putting it into Assassin. It will be a good feedback from Lumania, rather regarding how fast a sneaking rogue can be. He asked how people felt about making Shadow Dagger and Assassinate use the best of intelligence or dexterity in the DC formula, which people were going, I kind of didn't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. I think if you make it the better of, I wonder why a rogue would really invest into intelligence anymore. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, an assassination is going to invest in intelligence no matter what, right? Because that powers his assassination.
Well, he's proposing changing that DC to use dexterity or intelligence.
I misunderstood. Oh, duh! It says it right there, doesn't it? I guess that you probably wouldn't have a lot of intelligence-based range or rogues, but then on the other hand, that's what artificers are for. So maybe that's okay.
I'm guessing Voodoo doesn't really have an opinion here since he doesn't play melees.
I dabbled in Rogue, but it's been years, and I don't want to speak from a place of ignorance.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a tough call. It depends on how much you want them to be able to assassinate. I certainly wouldn't mind a boost to assassination, the ability, but I don't know that letting you use dexterity is the better option. Maybe there'd be other ways to do that. And they talked about adding gear too.
Well, the cool thing is that you could build a 2-stat rogue pretty easily that way. Just con and dex. So you would really have some better assassins than you have now. but only a little bit. I mean, you can get pretty close to that now, and I don't know. I think that my problem with the whole assassin pass right now is that assassin is, in my mind anyway, fairly dependent on the stealth capability, and stealth I feel just doesn't work well. So I would have rather they put the time into fixing stealth, and if they weren't going to do that, that they did this balancing pass on something else first, and come back to rogues after they've fixed stealth, or changed. I guess fixed is the wrong term, but changed it so that it's more usable and viable. That's just my opinion, though.
I'm trying to remember. I don't think rogues get automatic verbal attacks, do they? If they're assassins?
Assassins eventually do, yeah.
Do they? Okay. So I'm thinking if there's a way to let you use the assassinate ability without actively going into sneak just on like a small % chance while you're sneak attacking, I don't know, that might make it more effective.
I have a rogue that I play on Kyber every now and then, and I really practiced at this move where I like tumble back out of fight, toggle into sneak, tumble back into fight, and then try to assassinate. But even with practice, I can only pull it off so often. It's really hard. And somebody else had an idea in the assassin thread because I posted my point about, please fix stealth. It's broken. Do that first. And Severlin actually replied, and he kind of caught me off guard because what he said is, well, what do you mean stealth is broken? And I had answers to it, but I had too many to write down. I didn't have time. It was going to take me an hour. This wasn't going to be a 5-second response, so I had to walk away. But other people filled it in, and it started a conversation, and somebody came up with the idea of, well, what if stealth was just a toggle rather than a whole separate mode? What if it was more like a stance? Would that solve a lot of the problems with assassinate? And I think it would. I thought that was a great idea.
Would be interesting. I don't know. It would fix, I think, a lot of things with assassin, but I think you've got some issues with, is that actually using stealth? I mean, thematically and in other aspects, because there's ways to break stealth, and there should be ways to break stealth. So I don't know. That's an interesting question. I know I started picking up on it. I was never really good at it, but there's a guy in my guild that I played with a lot who's since left the game. But what he would do is he would jump into combat and in midair toggle sneak and then hit assassinate like as he was entering combat. And that's kind of how he would do it. And he was, it wasn't a necessarily high probability move, but he was really good at it and got it to work surprisingly well. But I don't know. It's something that you didn't have to go into sneak and assassinate, but without getting rid of that, so that was still viable, would be good. I think that's kind of, I don't know, maybe like a 2% chance if you were sneak attacking something for it to get whacked. That'd be nice.
I don't know. It requires some thought, probably more than you intended to put into it in this particular version of DDOcast.
Yeah, right.
So I suggest we move on, but I'm going to just leave it with my opinion is it doesn't work well the way it is, and man, I wish they would fix that. To me, that would be a much better fix to Assassin than anything they could do in the tree. All right, I'm done.
And if you want more of Geoff's thoughts, he had a post on that we highlighted last week in our last week's show.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Let's see. The mechanic tree. There was some hold up because the Players' Council wanted some kind of a pass on constructed traps, and they weren't planning on that. However, we have the details. So first, some changes with traps. The time to set a trap will be changed to 1 second. The time for a trap to arm after it's been set down will change to 1 second. So if you like using traps, yeehaw. The cooldown between setting traps will be changed to 8 seconds, and the time traps persist will be lowered to 60 seconds. I have no idea what it is now because I never use traps. New traps for higher levels will be introduced with higher damage. Players will be able to craft traps all the way up to level 27 with an appropriate increase in damage.
That's pretty cool.
Trap feedback will be sent to the player who set the trap. That means you will see damage numbers for your traps. Note that the DC for elemental and spell traps will remain as they are on live using a percentage of disabled device and increased by mechanic and artificer talents. Grenade DCs will be increased to 10 plus the minimum required level times 2 for heroic and 10 plus the minimum required level times 3 for epic levels. I don't know if that is referring to what type you are making or what, but there you go. New grenades with higher minimum levels and increased damage will also be introduced. So yeehaw. I was kind of wonder if they should just drop pre-made traps in random loot. Kind of something to chew over. Mechanic ability, there's in the core stuff, Tanglefoot, acid damage will scale with 200% range power. Both DCs are now 10 plus rogue level plus intelligence modifier. These are just the changes to mechanic tree, by the way. It's not a full rundown, but this is what's changing. Improved detection, you also gain +1 to hit damage and 1 extra sneak attack die with bows, crossbows, and thrown weapons. Expert Builder, you gain +1 competence bonus to critical threat range and critical multiplier for bows, crossbows, and thrown weapons. Critical multiplier increases to +2 for great crossbows. Yeehaw. Hip Flask, the action boost portion of Hip Flask now also heals you for 10d6 and adds +10 to dodge and maximum dodge when activated. Healing scales with 200% range power. Dodge
Ranged.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's ranged power. So they're expecting this tree to only build ranged power, right?
Well, I mean, the mechanic tree already has a lot of stuff for crossbows.
Yes.
And thrown weapons. So it makes more sense than it being melee power because you're probably not going to invest in that. Now, there's not a lot of forms of ranged power yet, but they are planning on adding them to the game.
I'm surprised it doesn't just rank with devotion power, healing spell power. It's healing.
Yeah, but a rogue's not likely to get very much in the way of healing spell power either. So.
All right, I guess it doesn't have to make sense. It does have to apply to the character class, and you're right, that applies more better, even if it's harder to see from a realism point of view. Oh my God, I just brought realism into a discussion of a fantasy game.
Yeah, there you go. Crossbow training will now be called Sharpshooter and will give +1 to hit and damage with bows, crossbows, and thrown weapons. And non-repeating crossbows increase the damage to +2. Lacerating shots and Thunderstone damage will scale with 200% range power. They're also increasing the DC to Thunderstone. Let's see. Wand and Scroll Mastery, I think they're reducing that from 2 to 1 action point per rank, which is nice. Let's see. Rack Construct, the damage has been increased and will scale with 200% range power. Well, this is kind of an interesting one because there's a range version of that and a melee version of that. So it seems like the melee attack should scale with melee power and the range attack should scale with range power. And there's no indication that that's happening here. The Ooze Flask, the DC was increased to 10 plus rogue level plus intelligence modifier. Also now reduces all types of the target's damage resistance by 10, 20, 30 with no saving throw, which is pretty nice.
Wow.
Yeah, that'll be fun in boss fights.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Even DR/hyphen, with it isn't typed?
It says all types.
Nice.
The damage for that will also scale with range power. Let's see. Fletching. This is kind of fun. You are skilled at enhancing, salvaging, and repurposing your arrows, bolts, and throwing weapons. You gain 10 range power. There you go. And your ammunition gains a 50, 65, or 80% returning chance. And they're also increasing leg damage on leg shot. Fletching is kind of fun. You can essentially get returning stuff off of non-returning stuff. Let's see. In Tier 5... the sharpshooter at that level, they're adding sharpshooter at that level with +3 to hit and damage with all bows, crossbows, and thrown weapons. Let's see. Mechanical reloader, you reload repeating crossbows 20% faster, draw thrown weapons 20% faster, and reload non-repeating crossbows 40% faster. Time bomb, the cooldown is now 20 seconds. The time to set the bomb is now very fast. Time before exploding is now 2 seconds. Saving throw to negate knockdown, now use your disabled device skill as the DC. And sniper, you gain 1 extra sneak attack die with bows, crossbows, and thrown weapons. Non-repeating crossbows increases to 2 sneak attack dice and also gain +1 weapon. Great crossbows now Vorpal on a 19 to 20. So, yeah, there's a lot of fun range stuff here. And I've been contemplating building a thrower for a while, and I am greatly intrigued by the possibilities of doing that more so now.
Right. Well, you could. What could this do to a halfling shuriken build?
Yeehaw!
I know.
that may or may not be my next DDOCast splat build. We'll see.
I wonder, does this make Great Crossbow an actual viable weapon?
I think most people would say no, just from the standpoint that there aren't enough great crossbows in the game.
Well, what about a Thunderforged one?
Great at level 20 in epic levels, but
Well, okay, right.
I think the biggest thing against great crossbows, I mean, this certainly will make them better for sure. And I think you could have a lot of fun if you combined mechanic and artificer trees with great crossbows for sure. However, I think most players who want to use great crossbows still will follow in the lines of give us more great crossbows.
Yeah, okay. And then one last question about all this. Does this mean that they are okay with the existing boosts to trap? I'm going to say trap smithing, and I mean finding traps and disabling them and opening locks, right? I mean, the mechanic is that tree, right? And there are no mention of that. So I guess they're okay with the levels that we're achieving on our own without any boosts.
Are you referring to the skills?
Yeah.
I would assume so. I don't feel like you need to change much there.
I don't either, but I noticed that all of that is missing and conspicuous in its absence. And
Well,
I was wondering,
this is only changes. They're not.
Yeah.
So there are some of that stuff in this tree already. They just didn't change
Exactly.
it. So,
Right. So they're specifically skipping it. That's my point. And I guess that means they're okay with the way it is right now, right?
presumably.
Presumably.
I want to know if the fletching thing stacks with the House D returning bolts.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a real good question.
Let's see. Some comments that Sev put in here. Run through these really quick so we get something that Voodoo can talk about. The flavor they want for a mechanic is to be a saboteur and sniper. They don't want them to be an artificer light, so they don't just want to import artificer stuff into the tree. However, you can multi-class, so I personally don't think that's a problem. If you really want to go crazy with some of that stuff, you can just do that. Be part artificer and part rogue, and have a lot of fun. Let's see. If you really want to conjure bolts, you have UMD and scrolls. They had a long discussion on conjured bolts versus fletching in the player council. So that was one point. Conjuration spell really isn't in flavor for rogues, and fletching will really shine when they have more powerful crafted ammunition with updated crafting systems. Hint, hint. Yes, please. And we will also be really good if we put more powerful ammunition on special vendors. And as an aside, he said he likes the idea of making ammunition found in treasure to drop with an increased stack size, but doesn't promise that for update 25.
Huh.
See,
I don't know. Rogues have such an inventory problem already. You know, they already have to stop. You know, right? They have to swap to various gear. They probably have to have multiple weapons because everybody does.
Well, you're talking about doing more of a thrower or using crossbows, right? Which is gonna, compared to most rogues, generally are along the lines of having 2-weapon fighting or single-weapon fighting, but a lot of 2-weapon fighting rogues. So if you're talking about throwing, you're gonna reduce that by quite a bit, I think. Let's see. They want to design space to be able to acquire new traps as a reward, which is kind of neat. They like the feel of traps being self-contained as much as possible. There's no tech to carry character stats onto traps. The mechanic enhancement is a special hand-scripted case. Changes to this trap system also touch the system for regular dungeon traps, so any mistake in hand scripting can affect the damage of all traps in dungeons.
Oh, nice.
I'm wondering if that goes back to the days when we had the insta-killing spike traps. They also envision having epic levels and ED cores providing range power similarly to how they provide melee power. There you go. Let's move on to some random loot stuff. This was a comment, I think, from several in. Between the rise to level 30 later this year and the still not 100% confirmed adjustments to Canth crafting, the opportunity to make adjustments to random loot may be there in the near future. They may be able to bring back some of the older suffixes and affixes. Still, it's unlikely that the old effects will be put back exactly the way they were, but they can't promise anything at the moment. However, they know that many people aren't satisfied with the current state of random loot. And I misquoted. That is from Vargwil in a post about when can we get some of that stuff back. All right. Now some balance stuff. This pretty much came all from several in, and there was a lot of stuff that he posted that was kind of hodgepodgey. And we'll try and get through as much of this as we can. From several, and he says the game is in a much better place. Previously, the end game was limited to pretty much casters and ranged evasion builds. Everything else was kind of a niche build. Now we have bards, paladins, and barbarians doing well. People have a reason to actually wear heavy armor. I'm actually changing my druid specifically because he was an evasion build, and now he wants armor because he gets smacked around. Melee is an actual playstyle, and characters built for it can actually melee against foes without immediately dying, which is all true, and I like it. The base values for armors are a little too high. They didn't change the base armor values, which will be rectified in the next update. They're going to go from 30, 20, 10 for heavy, medium, light. Holy Sword is overperforming. This Sev takes fault for that. His math did not take into account that improved critical is not working like the pen and paper version, and is instead doubling the entire critical range, which makes me a little confused because I didn't know that it wasn't the same. Varg and some of the more math-oriented players discussed this, but by the time he could get hard numbers on the issue and figure out why his math was wrong, it was really late in the update cycle. Unfortunately, critical threat range and multipliers really can't be dialed back without removing them entirely. And at the time, there was a lot of forum concern that the paladin changes still wouldn't be enough, so rather than pulling it at the last minute, he let it go. That's his fault. I'm not complaining. The light damage is probably a bit too high for a Knight of the Chalice, but it doesn't scale in the same fashion. For Barbarians, the Ravager heal is probably too strong, and the overall extra damage is probably too good for two-weapon fighting Barbarians. They are seeing some impressive numbers from builds using that to take advantage of all the Barbarian damage bonuses. That's his fault as well, because to be honest, he let himself be talked by the community into some over-buffing.
Wow, I have a hard time seeing that. I play a two-weapon fighting Barbarian. I thought I went through and took advantage of everything I could, and I'm not thrilled. I certainly don't feel overpowered. I guess that's just me, though. I probably did it wrong.
I was running with a guy yesterday who was a two-weapon fighting Barbarian and was putting some pretty serious hurt on stuff. But I didn't notice it being overly overpowered either. So, note that though they talk about some abilities overperforming, they have not planned any nerfs to paladins or barbarians other than the armor changes. They want to see how the builds perform in the harder Temple of Elemental Evil hard and elite modes before they talk about further balancing. One of the reasons they avoid frank discussions about power balancing is they don't want players to get stressed about potential nerfs when they aren't planning them, which is fair. This is probably overpowered. Oh no, they're gonna nerf it! Oh my god!
Quick, build a thrower.
I'll say it again. They're not planning on nerfing paladins or barbarians. Notice how he didn't say bards?
Yeah.
Bards run in fear. Swashbuckler does not seem to be overperforming in their tests. The DPS is strong, but is mostly single target, and it's in a good place for them. They understand that Coup de Grace has a high DC, but they're pretty comfortable with that. And they know it's easy to compare with Assassinate, but they want rogues to have their own advantages, not just copy the Bard enhancements. They're watching it, but they think it'll be fine. Let's see. Future plans. They're working on a Rogue Pass, which we've seen a lot of. They're working on Range Power. They have a Ranger Pass coming up. Looking at Warlock, of course, and they want to get the third trees for Favored Soul and Druid in this year. Artificers, I guess. When they do the Druid tree, they also will fix up forms so they can get good DPS without exploiting other systems. Fighter's in good shape, as it just got Vanguard and updated Stalwart Defender, but at some point they'd like to touch up Kensai as well. And they're fairly happy with the performance of casters. Alright, another post he made about teamwork. No one ever liked waiting for X-Roll, no one. The game did get easier, but not because all toons are self-sufficient. While he has played many Holy Trinity games, i.e. tank, healer, DPS, and while many are fun, they don't want to move the game in this direction. Although they can promote teamwork, we feel that the price of waiting as a DPS for an hour to find a healing or a tank is far more of a detriment to the game than the benefits of requiring those roles in normal content. Their plan is to encourage teamwork by making XP rewards, encourage teamwork, make the death penalty character-specific, and make new content hard enough on Hard and Elite that friends are welcome. Temple of Elemental Evil. They are planning on having a hard mode for Temple of Elemental Evil be hard and Elite to be really hard. A much larger ramp up than the content you are used to. The plan for endgame folk who want hard content that promotes teamwork is giving them that to them for new content they're introducing. So it sounds like that might be more true for newer epic content. that hard is hard, and elite is much harder. Let's see. Apparently, Steel Star is the champion of Artificers. Someone asked about no Artificer love. Basically, there's a question about whether or not the third tree is going to be shared with Mechanic. Sev said, no shared tree, Steel Star would kill me. He's been dying to work on the third Artificer tree and an Artificer Epic Destiny for that matter. Probably made a lot of people dance. Regarding Sorcerers, is there a planned third Sorcerer tree was the question. Probably question mark was the answer. There's a weird Sorcerer issue where they don't really know if they have 2 trees or 5 trees with the various elements. So they're not really sure. They will probably get them an additional tree at some point. I don't know. What do you guys think about? Do they have 2 trees, 5 trees? What do you think?
You go, Voodoo. I've been talking all show.
You know, Sork used to be my favorite class, but I've so pigeonholed myself into caster druid lately that I feel like I'm distancing myself more and more. I mean, it does seem to me like there are 5 trees. You know, you got the 4 savants, and then plus you got Eldritch Knight is the 5th.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't feel like there's a need for another one, but are people asking for something specific?
Probably. Well, I think this person was specifically referring to a comment that they were going to look at adding one, and never did. I would certainly say that, I wouldn't mind having another tree for Sorcerer. I, don't have problems spending all of my action points on a Sorcerer.
Oh my god, no.
I like having more than one element that I can use effectively. And 2, I don't really feel like... I don't want them to get their tree before, say, Druids and Favorite Soul and Artificers. So
hell yeah.
I would like to see a tree for Sorcerers that wasn't elemental. And I don't think the Eldritch Knight counts because it's shared. So, I mean, it's like half a tree, right? So, I mean, they have an elemental tree, and you have to choose one. And then they share a second tree. I'd like to see them have an actual, honest-to-God, third different way to play. I would like that.
I'm trying to remember... When you spend action points in those elemental trees, do you get 1 spell power per point for universal, or is it that element specific?
I think it's universal.
Okay.
I don't remember, but you're not locked into one tree when you choose a savant.
True, which is good.
But you are locked into elemental damage.
Not entirely. I mean, you definitely take a penalty to your opposing element, but you can still go cold and acid.
No, that's not my point. Choices. I'm not saying you're locked into an element. I'm saying you're locked into doing damage via elemental damage, some element or another, or multiple elements, but not probably not force. You're probably not going to. Yeah, you're not going to do control, right? I mean, you're not going to. Right? I mean,
I think what you're saying is you don't get spell-like abilities that are outside of elemental damage.
That is correct.
Whereas with Wizard, you can.
Or abilities. Right.
Yeah.
But the whole Sharadi caster phenomenon, I think, takes care of that because I mean, if you're casting unempowered, unmaximized, unquickened magic missiles for 4, 6, 8 spell points, and I mean that's functionally an SLA, and it's not elemental damage, and it's ridiculous damage.
Yeah, but it's not even sorcerer. It's every caster, and also every ranged character. So, I don't know. I'd just like to see another playstyle option for sorcerers. I think it's possible, and I'd like to see it. And by the way, looking it up in the wiki real quick, the core abilities give them spell power in their specific element and in the related element only. So, for example, the air savant gets electric and sonic spell power, not universal. And he actually loses acid spell power.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe it might be more effective if... I would like to see maybe that you get one of that specific, one of universal, and maybe -2 of the one that they don't want you to use. Just kind of as to make you want to use that element a little more than you might otherwise. So, I don't know. That's just kind of a quick thought. the last piece of news was that Update 25 will hopefully hit next week on Lemania.
Yay!
Yay, indeed. Bonus days through March 15th. You get 20% Epic XP and double commendations of Valor, which is convenient because I just hit 20 on the guy that I'm working on right now.
Yep, I like it too.
My cleric, who is currently a wizard, who I totally messed up when I was rebuilding him, but it's okay. He's a Shirati caster right now, so that forgives many sins.
Yeah, you can. It's hard to build a good Shirati caster or a bad Shirati caster.
I built him as a Sun Elf, and then I wanted to do 2 levels of Monk to just give him evasion to kind of play with that a little bit. And then I realized after the fact that in doing so, I couldn't get Lich for him.
Oh, uh-huh.
Don't.
Oops.
Yep. That's okay. He's a Shirati caster. He will forgive many sins. And he's not going to say it that way. He's just getting a wizard past life. I'm starting to work on getting all my characters up to 36 point builds, which almost none of them are. Let's see. Other store news. Autos boxes are back in the store through March 22nd. The sales through March 19th. 20% off of Slayer Boost, Jewels of Fortune, the Shared Bank, Platinum Vault, and Bag Deposit Box upgrades, which they just released more of those, so yay. You can also get,
that's on sale. Nice.
Yeah. I've been waiting for that to buy some of that.
Me too.
The Guild Beacon, you get 5 Guild Beacons with the coupon code BOAT15, BOAT15, 1 per account.
Nice.
Community
I like
news.
beacons. They're nice.
I never use them. I'll probably buy them because they're on sale. But
yeah, they were like 70% off once, and I bought like I don't know 300, 500 a bunch. I love them.
My thing is I tend to be faster than most players, so it doesn't usually matter how much running I have to do. I seem to always get to the quest like first or second anyways, so.
For me, it's the loading screens, man. They just annoy the heck out of me. So I'd much rather click one button, load once, and be where I want to go. Yay!
That's fair. Although I kind of have a little mini game with what's the shortest route to get somewhere. So.
Teleport.
Viamel is creating. This is for the Chronicle, 133rd Chronicle. Viamel is creating DDO walkthroughs and gameplay videos on YouTube. Vooduspyce has collected recent rated training videos from Sarlona. Are you doing one of those tonight?
That's me.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, we're doing an Abbott teaching raid at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Sarlona. Plenty of space. Come and join. If you hate Abbott, that's okay. You'll learn to love it with me, because I make Abbott fun.
What time is that? Because my gamer girl and I are both looking for Abbott. That would be fun.
9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, nice.
Mirrodin Man tiptoed into permadeath this week as well. Let's see. Kazakamio is organizing a one-on-one PvP tournament on Kyber. It's level 1 PvP tournament, although you can do pretty much anything else you want. So that'll be kind of interesting. The guild for the week. Sacred Silence is a Solona-based guild looking for any and all who play DDO. The guild has players from across the globe and an airship called the Silencer. I really wish you could paint your name on your airships. That'd be kind of neat.
It is.
The question or comment for the week. In real life, would you rather have high evasion or high armor class? We'll start with Voodoo.
Evasion. What do I need AC for in real life? Maybe if I got in a car accident or something, it would make me more survivable. But generally speaking, and I'm thinking about it in my life, and I'm not fighting a lot of monsters when I go out of my house. So I want some evasion.
Geoff?
Oh, I want high armor class, and I'm going to be a superhero, man. I'm going to be the Hulk, except super weak. But it won't be Hulk smash. It will be, I don't know, Hulk. Well, you can't hurt me. I may not be able to do anything to you, but go ahead.
He's going to go pick some fights.
That's right. I want to watch bullets bounce off me. That's right. Okay. Anyway.
I'm going with evasion simply because in my job, typically the danger is not being able to get out of the way of things. And I actually had, and this was several years ago, but I had a piece of lumber get away from me on the table saw, and one of the guys that was in the shop at the time was a big pen and paper guy. It kind of makes that weird sound, the kickback sound, it throws something at me, and it's one of those things that everyone in the shop stops and looks at you, like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. I rolled a 1 on my skill check. I got a 20 on the reflex save. I'm okay.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm clumsy. I need evasion.
I don't think you can have clumsy and evasion. I don't think that combination actually works.
But that's why I need the evasion.
Actually,
it won't be clumsy.
if you want to be real
That's what I
technical, I succeeded on an evasion, but my light armor, I have a pretty thick belt, one of those like heavy duty work belts, and that's where I got hit. So it kind of provided a lot of extra padding.
Oh, you got hit in the shiny part.
I got a little armor and evasion in there for both of them. All right, fan site news. DDO players had their 23rd episode. We got a shout out for our Splat channel and our debates on new players' advice from last week. Thanks again to Dre for hosting that. That was great that I could participate. The Order of Syncletica was looking at crafting items for a monk. RDDO got a bit of an update. DDO Gamer dropped an H-bomb. Which is fun.
It was fun.
It's the I can't remember what the actual specific name is, but it drops tasty hams everywhere. It's an explosive barrel with a pig on top of it, and it gives you a bunch of ham.
The exploding pork barrel. Yay, That was fun. Cleared the level for us. It was awesome.
Enrique finds some of DDO's best vacation hotspots in a new blog as well. Blogs this week.
Before you go by, I just want to put out an extra thing for the Order of Syncletica's article on crafting, because he didn't just do Kneath. I mean, he went through every system and talked about applying everything to monks. It's really quite thorough and quite interesting, and I got a lot out of it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Check it out, people. It's great.
Great. Blogs I want to highlight this week, and there's a lot of them. There will not be links for all these in the show notes. But Winter Fling this week was on Korthos and Galanda. DDO players had their 23rd episode. Cocktail had their 82nd episode. And Damsel DDO had their 10th episode. I think those were both last week, but I missed them. Let's see. Full Moon Fury had an article on storage methods. And Ches Mimic, DDO Gamer, Enrique, and Full Moon Fury all had reviews of the Mimic Festival, which we'll link to in the show notes. And we'll talk about that in a minute, Geoff. So hold your thoughts.
I'm saying nothing.
DDOcast news. Guild feud is still going. I would like to get probably another 70 or so people to take the survey. So if you haven't done that, please take that and have your friends do it. I have prizes. I have turbine points. I now have Mimic Creature Companions to give away with that. So if you're looking for an opportunity to get that, fill out the Guild Feud survey. It shouldn't take you very long, maybe 10 minutes. Other than the questions regarding your name and character and how I can give you prizes, everything else you should pretty much just answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Don't think too hard about it. The other thing is DDOcast is still going. I died. My permadeath character got squished. I realized after this that this is the first time I've played below level 15 with champions in the game. It certainly makes it harder, but I think the thing that really was noticeable was the casters, which one killed Lessa and one killed me.
Oh, I bet.
And they, because they're more ranged, right? So, and they do a lot of AOE damage. We re-rolled and we're back to Korthos and cruising through. So there you go. If you want to watch me die in a very unspectacular fashion, you can go watch that. All right, that's all the news for the week. We're going to do a quick, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we're already going pretty long, and I want to spend some time on the other discussion. So a mini discussion on the Mimic Festival and review of that. Before we do that, Cordovan had some points that he posted that I want to just kind of start with. They are looking into the results of it with an eye towards improvement next time. At the very least, they want to fix the lack of messaging when the frenzy arrives, work on a few bugs, and perhaps take a look at card drop rates and or rewards. The NPC is no longer available. It is tied to the event, which is similar to most of the events except for the festival. If you have lost motes or cards left over, save them. The Mimic Hunt is sure to return in the future. With that, Geoff, why don't you give us kind of your quick thoughts on the Mimic Festival?
Well, I'm looking at what you've written about what you're going to say, and you're hitting most of the points I'm going to hit. I mean, I had fun, and I don't want the rest of what I'm about to say to change that. I enjoyed the Mimic Fest, and it was much more fun than not having the Mimic Fest would have been, okay? But having said that, the fact that the only cards that were really desirable were 9 and 10, and also the only rewards that were not the Maybar Festival were 9 and 10, really meant that most of and the fact that you couldn't get a 9 or 10 unless you were just incredibly lucky meant that I'd game for all day. I'd gather up my motes. I'd turn them in all at once at the end of the day. 3, 5, 7, 1, 3, 5, and it's like I could hear the let's make a deal loser noise, like wah, 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 wah. And I felt like the curtain had parted in front of me, and I see a big donkey, and I wanted a new car. It made it feel like I had wasted all that time. I didn't want a donkey. I just didn't. So, and now, having said that, there are people I wrote this, and there are people who commented about it that they were new players, and they really enjoyed the fact that it gave them a chance to get the Maybar goods. So, for those people, that probably doesn't apply. For them, the lower numbered cards were useful. But for me, it would have been a lot more fun if the goods were distributed across the entire card range instead of all being on 9 or 10, or that you could trade up cards. 3 1s makes a 2, 3 2s makes a 3, because then I would have at least felt like I was making incremental progress towards getting what I wanted. Whereas otherwise, it just felt like, I'm probably not going to get what I want at all. I have no control over it. So anyway, that was most of my comments right there, and I don't want to go too long. What did you think, Voodoo?
Ditto on everything that Geoff said. I did have fun with it for sure. I like the fact that when I was just going through a regular dungeon, it was kind of exciting. Oh, look, a mimic! It was fun. And one of the most memorable moments when Gildy and I were two-manning. I think it was Deal and the Demon, and we got to the end. We're done, right? And we're just opening the end chest. And our guard is down, and neither one of us expected that end chest to be a mimic, and then it ended up killing her because we weren't even really paying attention. We're just looting like, oh damn, it was a mimic. So I thought that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I had a real big problem with the fact that you really needed the 9s and the 10s, and they were really hard to get. And if it weren't for the fact that everybody was doing the bank farm and you got 40 chests per instance there, forget about it. If you were just farming Irestone or regular class, you'd never have a chance. You'd have to be it's winning the lottery. And so, like Geoff was saying, there was nothing there I wanted. I'm really glad that they brought back the Maybar loot so that people who couldn't get it before have a chance to get it. But overall, it was a little bit lazy because there wasn't a lot of new stuff. And after turning in about maybe 600-700 motes and I didn't pull a single 9, I was done with it. I said forget it. I was selling all my motes on the shard exchange at that point because I was like, what? I'd rather make a few shards than try to get another +5 tome in a stat that I don't really need it anymore. I already have +5 stat tomes on all the stats that I want anyways. So I gave up on the event pretty early on because of just that it was just too hard to get what I might want.
Yeah, some of my thoughts. I liked the event. The spawn rate and frenzy seemed appropriate to me for just casual playing. Certainly, it made permadeath a little more sporting and interesting. I quite enjoyed Lessa running in fear from chests. That was pretty entertaining. I think that certainly added a really nice spice, particularly to that playstyle. I personally didn't turn anything in. I kept the motes I had, but I didn't turn anything in because I didn't really need any Maybar loot. They kind of locked themselves into that because when Maybar fell flat on its face last October, they said that they were going to provide a way to get that rewards through this event. Having said that, I think for me, the biggest thing was because it had very specific rewards, the randomization of the card grabs didn't work very well. Because what ends up happening is you know what you want to get, and anything that you get other than those 2 cards, you feel like you didn't make any progress because you can't do any exchanging at that point, right? You just get what you got. I think
the cards were tradable.
Well, the cards are tradable, but I don't know.
Nobody's going to trade you for a 5.
Yeah.
Nobody wants a 5. It's a donkey.
You're right.
So all the numbers one day.
And hopefully he doesn't mind me sharing this. But Jared and I had a conversation after the last show about this, and he was asking for some feedback. And kind of my big thing was, if you look at the reward list for the Mimic Festival versus the reward list for the anniversary cards. With the anniversary cards, it was kind of a hodgepodge of stuff, right? It was a bunch of consumables. They were fun little things. It didn't really matter what 2 cards you got. You could make something that was, unless it was a tome that you didn't need, you could pretty much make something that you could use and have a little fun with at the very least, right?
Yep.
With this loot list, it was very specific to Maybar. A lot of the items you probably didn't want anyways, or for a lot of, all 3 of us we already had. Now, it's great that some of the newer players had an opportunity to get some of that stuff. But because the rewards were very, very specific, the randomization of the cards that you got didn't work. I think you kind of need, if you're going to be really random with the cards, you need to have a reward list that's much more like the anniversary card event, where it's a bunch of different stuff. It doesn't matter what you get. You're going to like it. You're going to have fun with it.
Well, I think they could have made it work even with this list. They just needed to distribute it better. So instead of having all of the desirable stuff on 9 and 10, have spread it out amongst the whole list. So maybe a 5 can make an Eye of Ghostbane. Instead of having, you needed a 9 or a 10 for everything good.
Well, or what you're trying to make a card exchange, or even something Jeremy kind of tossing out there was a grab bag where you just put a couple cards in, doesn't matter what cards they are, and you get something random.
Yeah, a new random card, maybe.
But
maybe you put in 3 cards and it gives you a new random one.
Yeah, the idea being that, exactly what you were saying earlier, Geoff, that there was no incremental to get to the reward that you wanted. The Maybar loot, you really need to have that incremental thing, or Crystal Cove. All those things have very incremental-based systems, and it works great. But you take those systems and put them in a random draw system, and it breaks down completely. It doesn't work very well. So, I would say that the festival was a lot of fun. I liked the mimics. I'd like to see them like levers and breakables turn into mimics too, but that's probably a stretch wish. Just because then you'd have more things that turn into mimics to be a lot more fun. But I'd say I really want to see them. They've said that they're going to almost certainly be working on a new festival for October. I'd rather see the Maybar stuff go to that, have an incremental system, and then bring back, even if they just imported the anniversary card stuff into the Mimic stuff, maybe tone down the number of, say, I don't know, raid bypass timers they give you, because 4 is probably a little too many.
Bottled tornadoes.
I don't mind bottled tornadoes. And they made adjustments to those anyways. But, if you take that loot list that's more random, fun, goofy stuff, for the most part, that works really well for a random loot system. Specific rewards like Maybar or Crystal Cove don't work in random. They need to be incremental. And I'd also like to see it. So I want to see a new loot table, or heck, just import the anniversary cards. I don't care, or something similar to that. So it's fun, and then a longer time frame. I think a week and a half was just too short for this festival. It just needs to have more time behind it to really let you have some fun with it, collect the motes. I don't know. Those are kind of my thoughts. So let's talk about our main discussion point. We're going to talk about how to improve your offense. And what we mean by this is we're going to talk about melee, we're going to talk about range, we're going to talk about spellcasting. We're not going to talk about things like DC abilities. So we're not going to talk about like Finger of Death. We're not including that in improving your offense. We're talking about doing damage. Even though some of those spells do damage, we're not really going to talk about those. We're going to be focusing on how to increase the amount of damage you're doing, not how to be better at assassinating or that kind of stuff. So, I think I was going to talk about them beforehand, but I didn't get a chance to because of all the technical difficulties. I think we'll just kind of break it down into melee, range, and spellcasting. And maybe we'll just start with melee first. And I know Voodoo isn't big on that, but he's going to be a really big player for our spellcasting talk.
Don't count on it.
Feel free to jump in with anything you have to say. Geoff, do you want to start us off with melee? What are some ways to improve your melee?
Well, I'll just read through your notes. Here are some obvious things to talk about. One is power attack. Power attack adds a lot of damage if you are doing two-handed fighting, but it's useful even if you're doing two-weapon fighting. In fact, I would argue that it's more important to light damage builds like dex builds that hit a lot rather than hitting hard, just because you hit a lot and you need to do a little bit. Even any increase that you can make in each of those little hits is going to add up in a hurry. Let's see, you also then after that have improved critical. I guess you're going through the 2 feats that are most important for every melee build. So improved critical doubles your melee range. There's a couple of ways around improved critical. So I don't consider it quite as mandatory for a melee as power attack because you can get it. It doesn't stack with keen/impact, so you may have it on your weapon already. And also, it doesn't help against bosses unless you have fortification or some way to get through there. Many of them are immune to crit. But having said that, most of the time you want to have improved crit. I have it on all my melees.
We should mention too that it's a little tough to say that most bosses have whole fortification, because even in epic levels, there was a post a long time ago from the devs. There are very, very few, excepting monster types, which some monster types have full fortification, but there's very few, just random monsters that have 100% fortification to knock down all your crits. Certainly, some epic bosses have upwards of 80%, but unless it's a feature of their creature type, they usually still have some percent that they can get hit with fortification or for critical hits.
Right. Well, and if you have armor piercing, you can attack that even still. So it's never bad to have improved crit. It's not you absolutely no matter what have to have it. Power attack, I don't think there's any question. If you're a meleeer, you just want power attack. That's that. Do you always want improved crit? Probably, but not necessarily always. Now you have some other now you start talking about combat styles. Do you want to go through that?
Sure. I'll say I kind of put it more in the range category, but precision is also an option in melee. It conflicts with power attack, but it increases the amount of fort bypass that you have. So that's it's a possibility. And the swashbuckler tree at the top of its in tier 5 has an ability that it basically gives you the benefits of power attack while you're using precision. So I just want to throw that out there really quick.
Nice. Okay.
Pretty much when we're talking about melee, any kind of style of fighting that you're going to be doing, you can get a bunch of feats for. And so there's two-weapon fighting, two-handed fighting, and single-weapon fighting. And all 3 of those have a normal, improved, and a greater. And they do slightly different things. Two-weapon fighting gives you more attacks. Two-handed fighting gives you more glancing blows. Single-weapon fighting gives you a higher attack speed. But whichever one you're using, that's a good investment to go through. If you're using unarmed two-weapon fighting is the one that you want out of that bunch. If you're doing sword and board, shield mastery and improved shield mastery and shield bash, which is not necessarily related to the other 2, but those 3 feats, if you're doing those, shield bash gives you a chance to hit with your shield. Whereas shield mastery and improved shield mastery, they give you defensive benefits, but they also give you offensive benefits as well. And then if you're in a wolf or bear form, natural attack is what you're looking for. It gives you a pretty decent amount of double strike. I think it's 7% right now, if I remember correctly. That might be wrong, though. So those are kind of a feat structure for... It doesn't really matter what... that pretty much covers all the bases for melee combat styles. There's a set of feats for it. You don't see a lot of players switch between them. Most players will commit to one style or the other, just because then you're not looking for 2 sets of gear, you're not looking for 2 sets of feats. It's 3 feats for all of them. You can take natural attack 3 times. But that's kind of a feat structure. I'm trying to think.
I would comment on the only comment I would make on that has to do with two-handed fighting, in that unlike all the others, it doesn't actually change the amount of damage you do to your target. So it does change the number of targets that you damage. So if you're looking for an area of effect, then you definitely want to take all of the two-handed fighting feats. But if you just want to be able to hit one thing super hard, you don't need any feats for that at all with two-handed fighting. Just pick up a big weapon and start swinging it.
You
and
do
save the
technically
feats for
do
something
glancing
else.
blow damage to the thing you're attacking.
Oh, yeah, okay. But that's not always true, right?
I think it's always true. If you're using a two-handed weapon.
All right. Well, then I stand corrected. Do you want to talk about the importance of different attributes? Because I still think strength is definitely the king of DPS when it comes to melee.
Yes, but before we do that, a couple notes with two-handed fighting, because it's a little different than the other ones. Because what you're saying is mostly correct in that you're getting more glancing blow damage, but you don't just get more damage in and of itself. You get more attacks that do glancing blows. Because I think when you start, it's just your first attack will do glancing blows. I believe if you get the first feat, you get a second attack that does it, and then greater version, you get a third attack that will do glancing blows out of your 4 attack animations, which is something to note as well.
Oh, very nice. Okay.
I also want to mention that there's kind of a weird thing. If you're using a dwarven axe or a bastard sword, you can use the two-handed fighting feats with those, provided you don't have a weapon in your offhand. They do glancing blow damage. They are affected by the two-handed fighting feats as well. But you cannot use two-handed fighting and single weapon fighting feats together. I believe you can use two-handed fighting and the shield mastery feats together, though, if you want to get really crazy. But I haven't tested that. Okay, now talk about what you're talking about with stats.
All right. Since the game has come out, the highest DPS has been to load up your strength as high as you can. Now, there's been a lot of adjustments in the last couple of years where other stats are viable now because they not only affect your chance to hit but also affect your damage. Whereas for years it was just, well, we don't care about the history of things, right? This is the state right now. If you have access to the Harper enhancement tree, you can use intelligence to hit and damage. There's a couple other ways to do that. Artifice or range damage. There's several ways to get dexterity to hit and damage, but there's a couple of exceptions. I don't think charisma exists as a two-hit and damage unless you get a special charisma weapon. There's only a couple.
You can get charisma damage from Swashbuckler, and I'm trying to remember, does PDK? The Purple Dragon Knight might have some charisma stuff, but I don't remember if it's to hit into damage.
Oh, maybe it's con. I knew it was one of those C stats.
Constitution you can get with dwarves and axes, I think.
On damage too.
Right.
Okay, so then every stat exists. There's a way to get it with every stat. However, there are more ways to stack up strength than there is any other stat.
Is there a wisdom stat build? Is there a wisdom stat build?
Or is that the one that's missing then?
I feel like I've seen complaints about wisdom missing.
There's a weapon that allows you to do that, I think, isn't there? Well, now I'd have to look it up.
You can use wisdom with Zen archery, but that's a range thing. I think if you have Zen archery, you use wisdom to attack and damage with a bow. But I can't think of anything for attacking.
Well, and there's all kinds of these goofy special rules. Like for two weapons, or if you're using unarmed fighting, you can use weapon finesse to increase your chance to hit based on dexterity. But there doesn't seem to be any way to add dexterity damage to unarmed attacks. So you can only add strength in that case. And strength remains the king. You can use anything and be good at it, but strength is the best because there's rage and there's I can't remember the name of the shouty thing that is an area of effect buff on everybody's strength.
Primal Scream.
Thank you. So there are ways you can buff your strength that only apply to strength, and I think that means you can get it higher than anything else in terms of DPS damage.
Strength is the default. So yeah, it's the easiest to do that with. I think you can't if you're an assassin rogue and you have one of the cores gives you dex to damage for anything you can weapon finesse, assuming you have the feat. I haven't tested it, but that would lead me to say that you could probably get dex to damage with unarmed strikes.
No, I don't believe that's the case.
I'm not sure. I haven't tested it again.
Okay.
I don't have a rogue monk splash, so.
Yeah, it's only if you're using specific weapons, the Rogue Splash. You have to be using a knife or a kukri or
Or something finessable. One of
or
the
something finessable, but I think it specifically excludes hand to hand. I don't think there is a way to get extra damage on a monk or on unarmed fighting. I could be wrong though. I am several times a day.
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't. Again, I don't have one of those, so I kind of sometimes I ignore things or don't commit them to memory because I don't use them. We probably could have done a little better prep, but that's okay. Let's see. I do want to say there's a lot of enhancements. So whatever class you are, look at your enhancement tree and see if there's ways that you can look to improve your offense. There are specific enhancement trees that kind of lend themselves to one fighting style or the other. For example, two-weapon fighting, the Tempest tree for Ranger gives you more attacks. Pretty much anything that's going to give you more damage per hit, two-weapon fighting is going to benefit more from, because two-weapon fighting hits more often, is the way that works. Two-handed fighting, you're going to hit fewer times, but you can hit more targets, so you can get even more of an area damage kind of thing, particularly with glancing blows. Frenzied Berserker, I know, gives you extra stuff there. There's quarterstaffs kind of fall in there. You can get good in Acrobat and Hench and Mystic. Single weapon fighting tends to be more of a single target, but a pretty high amount of damage. You kind of I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I think generally if you really want to commit to single weapon fighting, you probably are going to want to splash Bard at least and get. That's where it really tends to shine with the swashbuckling tree. Sword and Board, the Vanguard and Defender trees. Well, Defender doesn't give you any extra damage, but the Vanguard tree and Fighter and Paladin are really going to do a lot of extra stuff there. I guess I should mention with single weapon fighting or two-handed fighting, if you're using Dwarven Axe or Bastard Sword, Artificer can use Rune Arms and get some of that in there and have a little bit of fun with that kind of stuff as well. If you're doing wolf form or bear form, now I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. One of the Natural Warrior enhancement tree out of Druid, of course, will boost that up as well.
Nature's Warrior.
Nature's Warrior. There we go. I think that's a pretty good. Then when you get in Epic Destinies, we're talking about melee. Look for things that increase. A lot of them will actually increase your melee power in general as well. Which is say, look for things that increase your melee power. Deadly items will increase damage for both melee and ranged, so you can look for those as well. And look for things that do extra things on melee hits. There's a couple items that monks can get. The spiked gloves from Crystal Cove. Pretty much any melee can. I think it actually works on range too. But there's Manslayer effects on the Stalker Ring out of House Cannith Challenges, and also the Drow Smoke Goggles, which gives you a Vorpal effect against humanoids, which can be really useful. I can't really think of anything else off the top of my head. Anything else you guys want to add in melee before we move on to ranged?
I find it important to have the right weapon for the target if you're going to be a melee. That's a bigger topic than we want to cover now, but it's really important that you look at the numbers coming off of your target, and that you make sure that the first number, which is your base weapon damage, is orange, and that means you're getting through whatever damage resistance the bad guy has. Hold on, I got to mute until this phone stops ringing.
So let's talk about ranged stuff, which is range gets a little more tricky because it's a little less obvious on some of the things you want to get. Some feats that you're definitely going to want to get. A point-blank shot will help with some extra damage. Precise shot, which lets you shoot through targets to hit the target you want to shoot. And improved precise shot, which lets you shoot when you're shooting through those targets, you can hit them too. So if you get things in a nice line, you can really go to town with that. Precise shot also comes with a secondary feat that if you stand still, you start doing more damage, provided you don't move. So those are good ones to get. Also, precision works with ranged. Power attack does not work with ranged. Precision will work with either one, so you can increase your fort bypass in that manner.
Oh, nice.
So that's a good trick. Then we kind of get into more specific. So there's kind of 3 different versions of range. There's bows, crossbows, and throwers. We heard in the discussion we were talking about with rogues, mechanics, kind of the new news that's there. There's a lot of stuff there for throwing, for crossbows and throwers. There's also the halfling tree has some throwing stuff in it. Throwing is kind of a little tricky because you gotta look a little harder. It's not as prevalent. The one thing with throwing weapons is quick draw is probably something that a lot of players might miss easily. Quick draw increases the how fast you draw weapons, which can be helpful for anybody. It also decreases the cooldown for action boosts as well, I believe. But it changes it increases how fast you can switch weapons. But it also affects how fast you can draw a thrown weapon, so you can throw them faster in that manner. Or it decreases the amount of time between throwing. You can also get shuriken expertise, which is specific to shurikens, but it gives you extra chances to throw, or extra shots, as it were, if you're using a shuriken based on your dex score. For crossbows, what you're looking for is rapid reload, which, again, it reduces the amount of time between your shots. So that can increase your DPS in that manner as well. Bows, you've got some more options. There's rapid fire, which again decreases the amount of time between shooting. Many shot is a fantastic feat that you can get even if you're not a ranger. Rangers get it automatically at level 6. That's why you see a lot of 6 rangers around, or 6 ranger splashes. You can also get Zen Archery, which is what a lot of monsters, I think, use, because they can turn bows into key weapons. And you can use Wisdom for attack and damage, I believe. So that's also an option there. There's something that went into my brain, and then I went, Endless Pholisade out of the Artificer Tree is really great for crossbows.
Bow strength.
Bow strength for bows lets you do strength damage with bows. Something that's really kind of important. So bows and crossbows, you don't get a stat to damage by default. That doesn't happen. There are ways to do that. The Harper Tree, I believe, will add intelligence to attack and damage, even though you wouldn't normally get that for ranged weapons. Bows, you can get strength damage if you have the feat bow strength, with rangers get automatically at level 2. Throwers use strength to damage by default as well. So those are all kind of things to be aware of.
Artificers get it too with spells.
With spells, yes.
Yeah, 2 spells. Insightful. What is it? Insightful Strike and Insightful something.
Yeah, there's a hit one and a damage one. You can only have one active at a time, though. It won't let you put both on the same weapon.
That is correct. You have to pick.
Crossbows can be used with rune arms, which is also something to consider. Bows, you have to use two-handed. There's no other option. Crossbows, you can use with a rune arm, and a rune arm only. Throwers, you can still have something in your offhand, so you can get some fun stuff there. Throwers actually work with swashbuckling, if I'm not mistaken. There's some stuff that you can do there as well.
Oh, and Brutal Throw lets you use your strength to hit on throwing.
Yes, that is also true. Although
we have a thrower in our guild. Actually, the character that's a thrower is not in our guild. I think he's actually in your guild, Voodoo. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I know it's a red-named one. But the cool thing about he's got his offhand, he's got something that does stat damage with any attack, and he's wearing that on his armor, and he's got that on a piece of equipment, and he's got it on his throwing thing. So every time he throws something, he's got all these different statuses and debuffs that go out on every single throw, like 10 of them. It's crazy.
I also want to mention rune arms are kind of a range. They're kind of in between range and spellcasting. But you can do extra damage with those by upgrading them in the Artificer Tree. They also are affected by spell power, which we'll talk about in a minute as well. There was something. If you're looking at throwers, the spell-touched throwers out of the Evening Star challenges have a % chance to do an extra strike as well, an extra shot as well. Now, with that, I probably should have mentioned too. With melee, if you look for double strike, that gives you more hits with your main. It's essentially a % chance to hit twice with your main weapon. Ranged is double shot, so you have a % chance to hit twice with your shot as well. I think that pretty much covers ranged. So let's talk about spellcasting.
Did we talk about feats though, like your epic past life feat double shot and your ranger past life feat?
We didn't.
Nope.
There are past life feats that do that for sure.
Those are some nice sort of freebies, and freebie in the sense that they don't take up any extra slot. Obviously, a bit of a time commitment, but if you're, there's still people out there that haven't really done the epic TRing thing. There you go. Patrick is guilty. There's lots of some really beautiful epic past lives. So take a look
and
at double shot.
Past lives as well. The Ranger past life adds 2 to range damage. Monk past life adds 1 to all damage.
Take a look at those.
On the note of past lives as well, the active feat for, or one of the active feats for the primal epic past life tree is Colors of the Queen, which has a % chance to do random effects for any attacks, melee, ranged, or spellcasting attacks as well. So.
And that's one of the things I was going to talk about during spell power, so that's a nice transition. So I feel like double shot is probably the obvious choice for your active stance. You can only have one stance for your epic past life per sphere. So Colors of the Queen would be in competition with double shot. So if you're a ranged tune, double shot's probably the obvious choice. But for a spellcaster, Colors of the Queen is the obvious choice. For melee, you've got the fast healing as an option, so that is going to be very tempting too. But if you don't need that extra healing, then Colors of the Queen could be a solid choice for melee as well. And so that has a chance to proc, depending on how many stacks of it, you can have up to 3 stacks, so it can randomly proc every 30, 20, or 10 seconds with some sort of random damage type. And it's a nice little boost at epic, but in heroic, you can clear a room if it procs like a sunburst. You're going through a heroic quest, and it's pretty awesome. Doesn't proc so often that it's overpowered, but it procs enough to be really neat.
Before we move on to spellcasting too, I want to mention a few things. There is in Sharadi, one of the Sharadi piece Destiny abilities is faster throwing, which is a good choice as well. Man, my brain is just all sorts of scattered. There's something else in there that popped out as well. We're talking about double shot. Something to know is if you're going to use many shot a lot, when you activate many shot, it gives you a 1 minute debuff of negative 100% double shot.
Yeah.
So if you're going to use many shot a lot, it's almost not really worth investing too much into double shot, because you're only half the time are you actually going to have any double shot to begin with. We should also mention, if you're using bows, the Arcane Archer tree in Ranger, you can get 2 different stances to use to do extra damage. You can get an Elemental or Force for one, and the other one you can get. You can do a couple things with it. You can either bypass alignment damage, bypass blunt, slashing, or piercing damage, or you can get a double shot effect on it as well. I think there's another one in there as well, but so they can get 2 stances.
You can get paralyzing and banishing and just all kinds of crazy stuff. It's got too low a DC for epics, but it's just awesome in heroic. Especially toggle on improved precise shot and have the right kind of arrow going, and you clear a room. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, that. So those are all good options as well if you're using bows. I think with that, let's move into spellcasting and turn it over to Voodoo for a bit.
Oh God. Thanks for shining the light on me. Well, we were just talking about past lives. So, when it comes to heroic past lives and spellcasters, there aren't any heroic past lives that add to your damage. There are obviously lots of heroic past lives that are helpful for spellcasters, but there aren't any that add to your damage. But some of the epic past lives are really nice for spellcasters. So, just starting with those, we already mentioned Colors of the Queen, really nice primal stance, and then you got your arcane stance, which is criticals. So if you're a spellcaster that's doing a lot of elemental damage, in this case, it's acid, fire, cold, and electric. You're doing an added 3% critical chance per stack, so up to 9% critical if you have 3 stacks and you are using that feat. That's huge. A free 9% critical chance is just giant. So huge for spellcasters that are doing elemental damage. You made some notes. The real obvious ones here for improving your spellcasting DPS is maximize and empower. I mean, these are absolute musts. I've heard of people talking about, oh, they just use maximize, they don't bother with empower. I think they're both important. If you're a spellcaster and that's your main mode of DPS, it is totally doable to play with those on at all times, even if you're not a double spell point caster. If you're a druid or you're a wizard, on my druid, I run maximize and power on all the time. There's just a couple spells that I might turn it off for because it might not be worth it, but generally speaking, it's always on.
We should mention how to do that.
Oh, good point.
How to turn them on and off?
Yep.
By spell.
Yeah. Go for it.
If you right-click a spell, if you right-click a spell, it gives you the options of which meta magics will be affected, and you can turn them always on or always off so that you don't have to be in the stance. You can also do 2 versions of the spell too, right? So if you put 2 magic missiles on your hotbar, you can have one of them have everything turned on. You can have one of them have everything turned off.
Oh, I've never tried that. That would be silly. My hotbars are so full. I barely have enough room for one of everything.
I know some people who do that. So.
Okay.
And there are definitely going to be there are some spells out there that it's just not worth maximizing and empowering. And if you're Druid, Earthquake is a good example. It does a little bit of damage, but if you turn on Maximize and Empower for Earthquake, it's going to be really expensive to cast, and that little bit of extra damage really isn't worth it. For Sharadi casters, Magic Missile, for example, you don't want to maximize and empower your Magic Missiles because then it's going to be cost ineffective. If you're going for all those Sharadi procs, you don't need Maximize and Empower for those, for example.
I agree. I'm not saying that that using the toggles to permanently turn off, or in some cases permanently turn on, one of the metamagic feats is silly. I'm saying he was suggesting have 2 magic missiles on your hotbar, one that's customized one way and one that's customized the other. I just don't have the space to do that kind of thing.
You can do it. I'm just saying you can do it, and some people like doing it that way. So.
Yep. There have been some times in which I've done that. I don't typically do that, but I've seen some value there for sure.
Well, it's good to know.
Some things that are slightly less obvious that I want to mention about spellcasting. The first is the feat's mental toughness. They changed it a while back that they now add an extra 1% to your spell criticals. So that can be something you might find useful in addition to the extra spell points. The other thing is DCs. A lot of, particularly evocation spells, they have a reflex save for half damage, or Disintegrate has a fortitude save. And if they make that fortitude save, it's a world of difference in the amount of damage that you do with Disintegrate. So consider what your DCs are. The thing you do not need to worry about is spell penetration. There are spells that do damage that are affected by spell penetration, but the damage is always a secondary effect on those. We're talking things like insta-kill spells, Finger of Death, that kind of stuff. They have to bypass spell resistance, and then if they save, they can take damage. DC spell casting, you don't have to worry about spell penetration because spell penetration does not block that incoming damage at all. So those are things to be aware of there as well. The other thing that's fairly obvious nowadays is spell power. Increase your spell power. for the particularly the damage elementals types that you want to do. Force does untyped impacts your untyped spells, so that's kind of one that's a little weird. If you're not familiar with that, you might miss that. But otherwise, look for items and gear to increase your spell power. Look for items and gear that increase your critical chance with certain types of spells to boost your damage that way. See, there's some that will do everything, will impact all of them. The other thing is implements. When you're talking about implements, if you look at a caster item, it will have something that implement, and then it will give you a bonus to your spell power, an implement bonus to your spell power for all spells. It's 3 per plus of the weapon, which means if you can increase the plus of the weapon, you get more spell power out of it. Which is, it's not a lot. I mean, +1 to your weapon only gives you +3 spell power. But hey, every little bit helps. And then the other thing is skills, which is a little weird, because your repair skill will add to repair and rust damage. Heal adds to your positive and negative spell power. Perform adds to your sonic spell power, because bards. And the skill Spellcraft basically hits everything else. I think I got that right.
Yep, you did.
You sure did. Good job.
The only thing I'd want to point out here, because this was confusing to me for a long time, is the difference. What does universal spell power do for you, and how does it stack with all this other stuff? So, universal spell power, which can be boosted with potency items, is essentially your default spell power. And you will use the highest of your universal spell power or your cold spell power when you're casting a cold spell. So they don't add, it's one or the other. So it can be more cost, if you're going to use all of the elements, then it's most cost efficient to raise your potency and your universal spell power. Hardly anybody does, though. Most people pick one or two elements and then min-max that specific one. So they're all about the force and the acid, or they're all about the cold and the electricity, or whatever combination it is. So there you go. I just wanted to point that out.
It should be noted, though, we were talking about enhancements earlier. In enhancement trees, so there's universal power and specific power, and I don't believe that that's the case in that specific example. So for your enhancements, when they increase your universal power, they're doing everything, and it will stack with other things in those trees that add to spell power. What Geoff was talking about is something about items, which I'm pretty sure the description actually indicates that they're on the same channel for boosting your spell power. The other thing was, I'll mention this for spell power, and then I'll mention how to find some of the stuff for range and melee. In your character sheet, there's an icon, I believe it's next to spell points.
Yep.
Yes.
And if you mouse over it, it will show you your spell power for all the different types of spell power that there are. If you're ranged or melee, there's another icon, and it's on the bottom right half of the sheet, that will show you your double shot, double strike, and I
think it's your BAB, right? Isn't it? If you
I think it's next to your base
next
attack
to the
bonus.
BAB, yeah.
It shows you your double strike, your double shot, and I can't remember what the third one is. Maybe your offhand percent chance. No, I don't remember what that one is off the top of my head. There's also another one which will show you your ranged and melee power as well. Then, of course, if you're in spellcasting, maybe Voodoo, why don't you talk about some tips for utilizing Sharati, since that's a pretty popular one.
Oh God, my Sharati champion, my Sharati caster is on the shelf. That's Voodoo. Don't play her a whole lot. For those that aren't familiar with with the Sharati caster, the idea behind it is that your when you're running in Sharadi Champion, and you have the Colors of the Queen enhancement. There's as well as a whole bunch of other enhancements in, the core enhancements of Sharadi Champion. And there's some other things like Nerve Venom, for example,
Double rain,
for a Sharadi caster. Double Rainbow. That's the stance that you want to be in from Sharadi. There's all kinds of chances for random procs, and with your Magic Missile and your Force Missiles, you're shooting 5 and 10 missiles per casting, and each one of those missiles has a separate chance to proc. And so if you're talking, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but if you have per missile, if there's 10 chances to proc some kind of random effect or damage, and you're shooting 5 and 10 of those per casting, every single time one of them is going to proc something. On average, one of them, at least one of them is going to crit, and you don't need to maximize or empower this, and so the damage can just get completely ridiculous because you're getting all these procs, and so the Sharadi caster gets its DPS from all of those random procs, not so much from the base damage of the Magic Missile or the Chain Missile.
The theory is essentially hit something a lot of times while in Rainbow stance with Double Prism on. The cores also give you extra damage there as well. And if you use Tea of the Queen, and you can get the Joy of the Queen, which gives you even more random procs. But the whole theory is use things that hit multiple times, which also includes things like Frost Lance and Scorching Ray, which do multiple shots as well. So the reason why Magic Missile is really popular is because it shoots 5 shots at level 10, I think is when you get the 5th one. But so you get lots of hits, so you're increasing your percent chance to get something by increasing the number of times you're hitting something. That's kind of the theory. But yeah. Let's see, anything else we should...
Something... Well, I definitely have some other spell power items that I want, and spell power sources that I want to mention. But with the Sharadi, one of the things I've been wrong about in the past, and I know they've tinkered with the way that it procs, so I'm not sure if they made some changes again at some point, and I didn't realize it. But a spell like Ice Storm has the chance to proc every time that those mobs are taking damage, and I have said in the past that that's not true. I thought that it was that way in the beginning. It seemed like after they made some changes to it, within that first year of Sharadi, that it didn't work that way anymore. But it is working that way now. I did a couple of epic past lives in the Primal Sphere where I was running Sharadi Champion, and I did test that out, and so again, a spell like Ice Storm, it's procking every single time it's doing damage. So AOE's can proc a lot too. So that's really nice. I thought that they changed it and it was only procking the first time. Some other good sources of spell power are going to be, you talked about implement bonus, and you said caster items have implement bonus, but there doesn't seem to be a really good clear rule as to which items are quote-unquote caster items. So like Green Steel, for example, you're not going to get an implement bonus there, but Thunderforge does have an implement bonus. So when you're a caster and you're deciding which weapon you're going to use, make sure you look to see that it does have an implement bonus. Also, if you're a shield-bearing caster too, make sure that you look to see if your shield has an implement bonus too. If your weapon doesn't, it doesn't matter. They both have it. They're not going to stack.
Generally speaking, if there's a caster attribute on the item, it makes it implement. I think is the general rule of thumb. So
is that what it is? Okay.
I think so. So if it has like a bonus to spell power or spell lore or something like that, it generally will put an implement bonus on it. Which is true for Thunderforge as well, because not everything out of Thunderforge is an implement.
Should we talk about that? What lore does in that? Should we talk about that?
Sure, go for it.
I wasn't volunteering, but just like when you're in melee, one of the most critical things is how often you crit and how much damage you do when you crit. That's true when you're spell casting as well. And your chance to crit when you're spell casting is based on how much lore you have. So that's part of it is the Voodoo mentioned this already. Mental toughness and improved mental toughness will give you a percentage chance to crit that goes on all your spells. But you can also carry for example, a frost lore item. Is that the right term?
I think it's ice
cold
lore, but
frost lore, ice
basically.
lore, some kind. Anyway, and an elemental lore item will give you a really big chance to crit. You can instead get a spell lore item, and that will affect every spell or have a chance to. But they're much smaller. So a spell lore 5 item, I think, gives you 5% critical, whereas an elemental lore 5 gives you 10. So it's important to have, whatever you're going to cast, you're going to want to have as high a spell power in it as you can, but you're also going to want to have as high a lore value as you can get for that element as well. There. Done.
In general, when we're talking about different types of spell power and lore, if it's universal and applies to everything, it's going to be much lower than if it's specific.
Mm-hmm.
There are some nice twists, too, that spellcasters should consider. One of the simple ones, especially if you don't have a lot of fate points to do high-level twists, is interrogation. Out of it's one of the divines. I can't remember if it's one of the divine trees in any event. It's a tier 1. It does 5% universal spell power and 1% universal critical spell chance. So that's a nice tier 1 twist. And then Empyrean Magic out of divine. Ah, crap.
I think they're both out of Divine Crusader.
Yeah,
Divine Crusader. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, they both are. I just looked it up.
Empyrean Magic is a really awesome tier 3 enhancement that you can twist it. You can twist in if if you're not running in Divine Crusader, and it every time you hit with a fire or a light spell, and I can't remember if there are others as well. It adds 1% critical chance, and it stacks up to 10 times. So if you're a spellcaster that's doing a lot of fire and light damage, that could be pretty intense. And I tested out even on my druid that my main modes of damage are not fire and light, but I was able to keep Empyrean Magic stacks up pretty high. So I'm actually considering, even on my druid, possibly twisting that in permanently.
And healing. The other thing it does is healing.
Yeah, heal. That's right. Positive spells too. So
which is really easy for a druid.
Yeah. So a couple other things. There are a lot of spell power potions out there. In House P, there's some in Meridia, there's some other places as well. A lot of people don't realize that these are out there. You can get up to plus 25 alchemical bonus to your spell power from these potions. You can get in House P, the House of Magic or whatever, I can't remember what it's called. And they have them for all the elements. For whatever reason, the light spell power ones that you can get from there only go up to 20. But generally speaking, they're all there. You can buy them for plat, and they last 3 minutes each. They're specific to a certain type of it's not universal, specific to a certain type of element or force or whatever. And then also, and this is something I only recently learned in the last couple of months, is that the potions that you get are clicking on your Commendations of Valor. You double-click on your Commendations of Valor, and it brings up a barter box, where you can get your Hearts of Wood and stuff like that. There are these universal spell power potions. They last 10 minutes, and they add 30 to your universal spell power. Now that is an alchemical bonus, and I overlooked that for the longest time because I said, oh, that's the same as the potions you're getting from House P. And it is typed the same, but it actually does stack, and I tested that. So pretty nice. Maybe it might be too costly for you to run with those all the time, but great for, boss fights and raids and stuff, and it lasts 10 minutes. I think it's maybe like 20 commendations or 25 commendations to buy one of those.
Good for incremental points.
Sure.
The other thing to measure, we talked about the skills, right? If you increase a stat in that affects that skill, that's also more. Even if you don't invest into that skill, you'll get a little bit out of it. So the obvious one would be spellcraft, which is intelligence. So every +2 to intelligence, you get 1 more spell power for a lot of different elements.
There's a lot of good universal spell power enhancements available in the Harper tree too. So if you got some leftover points, take a look at those. That can really add up. And I also want to mention a few. There's another type of spell power source called psionic, which there's not a lot of sources of that, but 3 of them, and these may be the only 3, are the Zekosian Ear Dweller, the Meridian Fragment, and then the Planar Conflux set bonus. Those are all psionic. So realize they won't stack. If you're running with a Meridian Fragment, it might not be a lot of advantage for you to click on your Ear Dweller. Or if you're running a Conflux bonus, it might not be advantageous for you to click on, etc. But consider those. And also, it can be really tricky for a spellcaster to fit in a source of a potency item. In addition to having an item that ramps up your main 1 or 2 damage modes, it's good to have a universal spell power item, a potency item. Potency affects all. And so some of the better sources of that would be like your Sage's Ring that comes out of What Goes Up. The Epic version, I think, provides 92 potency. That's the highest in the game. Guaranteed drop on the end reward out of What Goes Up. And also you got your Halcyon Boots out of your Fall of Truth raid. That's 80 universal spell power. Your Belt of 7 Ideals. That's 72 universal spell power. Also, you can put 100 universal spell power on a Thunder Forged weapon. However, if you're just single wielding a Thunder Forged weapon, you probably want to put 150 spell power to your specific, your main damage mode. So in my case, in my Druid, I have 150 Glaciation. That's going to be your better option. But if you're dual wielding Thunder Forge, that's a good option to consider to have that 100 universal spell power. And I also want to mention, if you're not familiar with Thunder Forge weapons, maybe you haven't run the raid, you can craft up to tier 2 weapons, which is getting your spell power and your crit chance, or not crit chance, your spell power and your DCs without ever having to run the raid. All of the ingredients you need to craft up to tier 2 Thunder Forge are unbound with the except Commendation of Valors, which you can get from running quests.
I think you can get a Dwarven arcane lore out of that too.
That's tier 3, but yeah, you can.
That's tier 3 though, so you got to run the raid.
The lores are tier 3, unfortunately. The last thing I want to say, and then we'll move on. It's a great discussion. A lot of good tips here. Is look for things that might benefit you if you're using one of the. Look for things that aren't really obvious, particularly when you're talking about enhancements. The Henshin Monk tree, for example, has fire and force spell power in it, which there's a lot of casters that will splash Monk for evasion. It's not, not necessarily worth getting a class you weren't planning on getting anyways, but you can do a lot of really fun synergy stuff when you start looking at that. The other thing is, if you're a ranged character, for example, and you're going to play in Shirati, look to increase your universal spell power, because that'll increase some of your Shirati procs as well. So with that, we're going to move on to our lightning post. And this question, we're going to keep this really short, so just like, guys, this could be a whole topic in and of itself. But just like 1 to 3 things to answer this question really quick. What's a good way to work on making your character more elite ready?
Gear is really the number one thing, I think.
Survive it.
Go ahead. No, I was done. That was it. Just gear. One word.
I'm a big proponent of survivability, and heavy armor is a more viable option than ever, so take a really serious look at that. Even if you're a caster, it's actually pretty easy to get 0% arcane spell failure, and the advantage you get from all the PRR and the MRR now, since the armor up changes from U23, absolutely huge. Really take a look to see if you can fit heavy armor in. It may be more advantageous than saying even splashing and Monk or Rogue to get evasion, depending on your build.
All right, and one more thing I'd throw in is you're going to need some self-healing. You're just going to. Even if you are in a guild group with a healer, the damage in Epic Elite comes so fast that sometimes there's just no time for anybody else to react. Own your own healing as much as you can.
And there's certainly places in the game where, this is just Elite in general, where so a certain point in time where Cure Serious wound potions aren't going to cut anymore, and a certain point in time where heal scrolls aren't really going to cut it anymore. And hopefully you'll have something else you can go there. I would say a good way to work on making your character more Elite ready, and this is less about making your character, but work on your skill, on your playing skills and your Twitch skills, and your knowledge of the game, because the more if you have some good playing skills, you can forgive a lot of sins on your character and play with a less good character and play them very effectively and not have to worry too much about that. And I would say that, I think generally speaking, the player base has a much higher expectation of what an elite-ready character is than what you actually need to be. You'd be surprised what you can get away with, even on elite. So with that, Geoff, tell us where people can find you and follow you and see what you're doing.
DDO Gamer, DDOgamer.com. It's a place where we talk about DDO because there's hardly enough of those anymore. Actually, it's fun to see all the different new sites blossoming all the time. But anyway, DDO Gamer, fresh content that probably is about DDO pretty much every weekday.
Jeff, or not Jeff, Voodoo.
My DDO YouTube channel is an official fan site. It's called Vooduspyce. Over 100 videos, quests, raids, tips. My quest videos are not just watch me run a quest. It's not just watch me invis run to the end and kill the boss real quick. I actually narrate. Almost all my videos are narrated. Tons of helpful tips. Great for new players. I think that power gamers are going to find absolutely nothing at my site, but and are going to be extraordinarily bored. But if you're a new player, or even if you're just sort of somewhere in between, I think that there's going to be a lot of good stuff there.
If you're any type of player and you want to be entertained while watching people play DDO, check out DDOCast. You can find it on our website, DDOCast.com. You can find it on our YouTube channel. I hope they're pretty. People have been telling me they're pretty entertaining. I think that's probably 80%. Les is doing. She's fantastic to have around and makes everything a little more fun.
She's so funny. Yeah, she's just really
a blast. I love her. She's great. But if you want to watch us mess around in permadeath, that's a great option as well. With that, thanks for listening to the show. Thanks to Geoff and Voodoo for hanging in there with technical difficulties and starting a little late, having a long show. Thanks, you guys. You guys are great. Thanks to our other contributors for DDOcast. I really appreciate the whole team. Thanks to Turbine and Wizards for letting us play DDO, and thanks to Cyber Ears for hosting our podcast. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you want to be part of the show or just say hi, you can email us at DDOcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for the latest cast updates. Our closing tip for the week, an appropriate one: don't overlap your blade barriers. When you can also say firewalls as well. You have to be careful how you overlap your spells, otherwise they block each other out. Blade barrier more so than the other ones. So don't overlap the rings, because the safe area will overlap the other ones, and you won't get any damage.
Crossing the streams is bad.
Yeah, that. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chest level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to stay alive, because otherwise your offense will be 0.